Hello, this is Freethought Forum. I'm Faithless Forrest.
And I'm Joe Barnhart. Welcome.
And we want to let you know that if you don't believe in God, even in East Tennessee, you're not alone. Right here you can find free-thinking atheists, agnostics, and this show is for them and people who are interested in knowing what it's like to live a life without superstition. Today we're going to discuss childhood indoctrination. All right, and this is a call-in show. We invite callers to start calling at the phone number there on your screen. We have a call screener who will speak to you a little bit first, so you can get it right in line now and call while we go over a few announcements. Get a pen and paper ready. Later we'll give you an email address and a phone number that you might want to write down to get further information. Okay. The sponsors of this show are the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. The Atheist Society of Knoxville does a happy hour every Tuesday. It actually starts during the last half of this show at Barley's in the Old City. You can meet there for good conversation, food, and drink. On Thursday, April 7th at 5:30 p.m., there will be Lakeside Libations at the Lakeside Tavern. Look for the silver-covered copy of The God Delusion to find the people at both of these locations. All right, Joe, you want to talk about the rationalist activities?
The rationalists have activities each week. For example, they're having a book
club.
Yeah, and The Age of Empathy is the title of the book. The subtitle is Nature's Lessons for a Kinder Society, and that's Sunday afternoon on April the 10th. And then also they're having a lecture on the 17th of April, and that's why unions are needed. And that, of course, is always open for discussion with the rationalists, and plenty of good parking places. And be sure to look at the website, if you would, get the location and the time.
All right. And if you have friends who are out of town and might like to see this show, please tell them that they can watch online at ctvknox.org. All right. Well, we have a few items in the news to cover here. Yesterday was an important Supreme Court decision happened. The Arizona Christian School Tuition Organization versus WIN was decided. There are two issues involved, and in plain English they work out like this. Does a taxpayer have standing to challenge a state tuition tax credit as unconstitutionally violating the separation of church and state? Issue number two. Does a state program that gives parents tax credit for tuition at private schools violate the separation of church and state when, of course, most parents are giving it to pay for religious schooling? Well, I know once upon a time it was Catholic schools which wanted the state's money to pay for parochial schooling, and Protestant denominations resisted that because they wanted people to have a common cultural experience with a common school.
Yeah, the public school may be one of the best inventions of the United States. People can go together, and despite their differences, and learn from each other and learn to live in peace.
It prevents us from becoming balkanized, as they say, because that unfortunate part of the world.
It's a wonderful experiment. For all the flaws that people find in the public school, mainly because there are flaws in us as people. But you really have a marvelous experience to know other people. I believe we already have a call in. Let's see what it's
all right.
Please go on. Let's hear it.
Hello, caller. Can you give us your name?
Hi there. This is Eric Gunderson calling in from sunny Southern California.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you for calling, Eric. I've just reviewed the two issues in that decision and wondering what opinion you might have on them.
Well, I got to tell you, it's an evisceration of the ability of people to go into court and challenge things that the government is doing to endorse religion. Excuse me. It's sort of a travesty that people can't seek relief from their courts when the government goes out of its way to violate the Constitution. What we see in this Arizona case is really a continuation of a trend that's been in place for many years about how the court has handled those kinds of issues. And it's no surprise that by now we can trace out a pretty clear roadmap, if you're in the government, how you can get public money to subsidize a religion.
So, in a sense, what this ruling has done is it's enabled people to give money to a third party. It was called something like the Arizona Christian School Tuition Organization, and by giving it to this third party, which then funds a school, they're circumventing the prohibition against
funding money for the church,
against establishing religious schools.
For the temple. One of the difficulties with this, one of the disadvantages, is it takes money away from the public school system, it seems to me, eventually. It also, if we're not careful, we'll simply say, well, we've got kids going to this religious school, the Muslim religion, the Hebrew tradition, and that's their school. Then you've got the Protestants, and then of course Protestants are going to divide it up in their various versions of Christianity, and then you're going to have kids in these little ghettos, as it were, whereas the public school brings people together so that they learn to do what they do in the business world, is they live together and cooperate with each other despite their differences. As a matter of fact, they learn from their differences. So I think there are great disadvantages to what the Arizona experiment is, and I hope it is just an experiment. Go ahead.
I don't disagree with what you have to say there, but I think that confuses the issue of what the Supreme Court's decision yesterday is about. What the Supreme Court was talking about yesterday is who gets to come into court and say that doing things that way represents a violation of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment to the Constitution. What you're talking about sounds like
it's on down the road.
Why, if you were in the Arizona legislature, you would have voted against this law. And like I say, I agree with you. But what's going on in the court is something a little bit different than that. Who gets to complain about this?
Yeah. And what they've done is they've ruled that citizens who pay taxes can't sue for unequal treatment, where some people get to free themselves of their tax burden by paying for the school of their choice, where that choice may include a deeply religious school that is not doing a good job of raising good citizens.
Or maybe it is, but that's not the point.
It's not the point.
The point is that it is indoctrinating children into religion, and the state, by providing a tax credit, is subsidizing that indoctrination.
Could we have eventually a whole program on this, and would you be willing to participate in that if we could get back in touch with you on this? Because
I would think of that as a marvelous opportunity.
Because it deserves a full hour for discussing this. And you would be willing to do that with us?
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
So Eric, there was nothing about the Supreme Court's decision that would favor Christian schools now, would it?
Not explicitly. What I'm reading as I go through the implications of this is that the way the Arizona program is set up, there's a separate foundation that is, it's a separate corporation than the religious schools or the religious institution, and it provides scholarships to students who earn it. Reading between the lines, we see that parents who donate money to this charitable institution and then receive the tax credits for doing that, it's their kids who are the ones who wind up getting the scholarships. So it's sort of a pass-through organization. So the religious entities that wind up benefiting from this are the ones that have enough access to money and lawyers to create these separate entities. So, who's that going to be? Is that going to be the Muslim mosque down the street, or is that going to be the Protestant megachurch that takes up an entire city block? The wealthier, the more powerful, and the more politically well-connected entities are better able to take advantage of what the Arizona legislature has created here.
And most importantly, it doesn't allow the individual that same right that it does these organizations who can afford the overhead of creating this fictitious entity.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
That is also a fair critique of it.
Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Good to talk to you guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Very much.
Thank you for calling in, and we hope some other people will call in and talk to us about the issues of the day. All right, why don't you push the off button there. Thanks, Eric. Okay, we were going over things in the news, and we want to mention some in the news for the Rationalists of East Tennessee is the recent selection of upcoming books for book club, and I'd like to briefly read the titles of these. We have Irreligion, a mathematician explains why the arguments for God just don't add up. We have 12 by 12, a one-room cabin off the grid and beyond the American dream. The Moral Landscape, how science can determine human values. The Things They Didn't Tell You About Capitalism. Religion and Science by, is it Bertrand
Russell.
Bertrand, there's something about his name, it chokes me.
Bertrand Russell, yeah.
And Michael Roos. And obviously that's not a recent publication. Bertrand died
Bertrand Russell's been
20, 30 years ago.
20 years ago, yeah.
All right. And finally, The Grand Design by Stephen Hawking. Always interesting to read his work.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We'd like to also mention that the Freedom from Religion Foundation has ongoing scholarship programs. Every year they grant scholarships, and it's an essay contest. The essays are due somewhere in early June, so you want to go and find out about them now. The subject for college-bound seniors works up like this. Describe a moment that made you proud to be a free thinker. The dictionary definition of free thinker is one who forms his or her opinion about religion based on reason rather than faith, tradition, or authority. You may have had a moment, experience, or epiphany that led to or affirmed your rejection of religion. Maybe you stood up for free thought or spoke out against the encroachment of religion at school events or in the government or classroom instruction, or perhaps even to members of your family. Use that moment to illustrate why you're a free thinker. You can visit the Freedom from Religion Foundation and navigate under Outreach and Events and look for the Student Scholarship link as illustrated on the slide above my head. All right. Well, Jonas, we've gotten through the preliminaries, and today we're here to talk about childhood religious indoctrination. I believe this was a subject of your choosing, and I assume you've got a lot of points to make about it. So how do we begin?
Okay. First of all, let's talk about parental rights.
Okay.
I don't think the state should be interfering with parents so long as they're, not cruel to their children. Children have a right to be protected. But it is not the state to tell people how parents should raise their children beyond certain, sane points.
When you say beyond a certain point, well, actually, the state insists that children be educated.
Yeah, I don't want to get into the exceptions. Mm-hmm. Education is something we do insist on, and we put parents in jail if worse came to worse, if they don't cooperate on that. But usually, almost all parents put their children in the public school, or some school at least, but we do insist on that. And there's certain minimal things that we require of parents, and then we say the parents have a right to raise their children according to their insights and their whether they're atheists or Hindus or what. It's the parents' rights. And I'm supporting that. This does not mean that I agree with what every parent says, just as not every parent would agree with what I would say. But we live in a pluralistic society, and so we have to respect that. And so let's talk about indoctrination and see where we go with that.
All right. Are you prepared to offer me a definition of indoctrination?
Yeah. I'll give you what I think is a neutral definition: to inculcate information and a point of view and to do it thoroughly and well so that the person understands it and grasps it. For example, we indoctrinate children in mathematics, in the multiplication tables. We indoctrinate them in how to read, and we indoctrinate them, we hope, in something like respect for other people. And we try to say, if you're going to represent another person's point of view, we try to indoctrinate our children to say, represent that viewpoint accurately, otherwise we are lying, you see.
In fact, after becoming a member of the Rationalists of East Tennessee, one of the things I learned about is some of the vocabulary of honest debate. And there's a dishonest technique of debate called the straw man argument, which is to misrepresent your opponent's point of view, thus creating a straw man, which you can then easily defeat, because we all know that straw men don't fight very well.
Yeah, we're all real good on defeating straw men, but then that's not accuracy.
That would be dishonest.
Yeah, and yeah, it is dishonest, and it's unfair both to the person we are misrepresenting, and it's unfair to us when we do it, because then it deprives us the opportunity to engage accurately and fairly with the other person. In other words, let's suppose you and I strongly disagree. Well, first of all, we have to understand each other. Otherwise, it isn't a disagreement.
It's a mistaken conversation.
Yeah, it's maybe even a shouting contest, but it's not disagreement. So disagreement presupposes that we actually listen and try honestly to understand from the other person's point of view, and that's very hard work, as we have discovered.
Well, I will also say that there's an awful lot of straw man arguments floating around on many subjects. I attended a lecture, I think it was by Michael Schremer, during Darwin Day week at the University of Tennessee a few years back. And afterwards there was a proponent of intelligent design who had asked questions of the speaker and spoke to several of us after the presentation had formally ended. And it was only, we literally walked to our cars together, and it was only after talking to him for 10 or 15 minutes that I said, that I realized that he didn't understand that Darwin's theory of evolution was not a theory of the beginning of life. I said, no, it's a theory for how species come into existence. The beginning of life is a separate problem, and Darwin declared it as such.
Exactly.
And I remember just a look of surprise on his face. He as much as said, well, then what good is it? Meaning, what good is the theory? But I said, well, that's what it's about, and it's a separate problem. I didn't have the presence of mind to say, well, we can have a theory that describes how gravity works without understanding anything about how gravity may have come into existence.
Exactly.
Different problem.
This week I talked to three people who were very religious. One of them went out of his way to oppose Darwinism.
Do you think he had an accurate description of Darwinism?
I personally don't think he did at all. The other two were ministers, and they are both very strong Darwinists, both of them. So what I was saying, and in fact I've brought here a piece of paper I wanted to show on fairness.
It would appear that you're doing Venn diagrams here.
Yeah, I'm doing Venn diagrams.
All right, hold it up good and high so that it gets above the banner.
Okay, yeah. I've got a
I can hold it for you.
Thank you. A representation there. And the A group would be the atheists and the agnostics, and the other group would be the theists. These are people who believe there's a God, a creator of the universe, and those could be anywhere from Christians to Jews or Muslims and so forth. Now, there are various groups within each of those. There are many kinds of atheists and many kinds of theists, but for the time being, let's just say these two groups.
All right.
Now, and what I'm trying to say is many of these people in those two groups overlap in terms of, in fact, I know many of them in both these circles, and they are highly rational people, and they believe in the open society.
Okay.
In fact, two of them wrote a book together. One of them is a scientist, a brain scientist, and that his name is John Eccles. He comes from the Christian tradition. The philosopher is Karl Popper, who calls himself an agnostic, but his works pretty much indicated his point of view is an atheistic point of view. But they have worked together for years and have many values in common. They have written a marvelous book called The Self and Its Brain.
The Self and Its Brain.
Oh, yeah, it's a superb book. And in the end of the book, they dialogue back and forth, showing where they agree and where they disagree. But one of the things that interests me in it is that Eccles, and this is the theist now, said that he had worked so hard on a particular problem, and it looked as if that it had failed, and he was depressed. Popper, the philosopher, who was also a philosopher of science, talked to him about this and helped him to see that part of the job of a philosopher is to try to find the flaws in his theory, and then if he can shoot it down, that's not failure. That means he's laid the foundation now for a better advanced possibility.
That's great. In the physics community, we often say that the interesting things are where the theories don't work, because that represents opportunities for new learning, and that's why we're always excited when we're hoping interesting and unexpected things come out of the Large Hadron Collider, which has recently come online in CERN.
In fact, some of your better theories are the risk-taking ones. I mean, I can always be true, like I could say cats are heavier than grains of salt. It depends on the grains of salt.
That's okay, true, but it's not a very useful theory.
It's not a very useful, you see. So if we're trying to advance knowledge, then we try to move beyond where we are to see if we can improve our knowledge.
So we've touched on the scientific method, as well as how some theists can be quite rational.
And some atheists are quite rational. Some theists are irrational in some areas, and some atheists are irrational in some areas. I think
all individuals get a little
beings.
of that to some extent. Yes.
So in other words, we are human beings, and we have enormous things in common. And so part of being rational is to find those things we have in common so that we can, to communicate. And that's what we want to do with our children, is to say, I'll give you an example. A child is going to be in a neighborhood, and there's going to have different religious backgrounds, different political backgrounds. But you can't just select your friends according to your political and religious viewpoints.
Well, we like to think that's not the America that we live in.
That's a good way to put it.
So we want to see good indoctrination, and good indoctrination of children would include pluralism and respect for others.
Yeah. And that means that a child can hold strongly to his view and still say that the other child is mistaken in his view, but you respect that child and you're willing to learn from that child because you know you don't know it all.
And hopefully have honest dialogue.
Honest dialogue, good. And in the meantime, all parents, whether they're theist or atheist, would seem to want their children to have confidence and trust. Mm-hmm. And you get that. Here's a book I want to hold up because it's so beautifully written. It's called Finding Our Tongues.
Hold it for the camera, Joe.
Yeah, can you see it? Finding Our Tongues. The woman is an anthropologist, and she has studied the raising of children around the world, and she's also learned from other species. And what she's trying to argue in this book primarily, that those years in which the mother is singing the lullabies and the father is holding.
So holding our children is an important thing. Maybe we get our little slide up about that. The importance of stimulation to young infants.
And the security. See, a child needs. I mean, there's a fear of falling. There's a fear of disconnection. And so she argues that mothers, when they were working out in the fields, maybe had to put the children down, but they did sing to them while they were working. To let them know
they're there.
And that's, she argues, this is the way human language began. And and it has also roots among primates who are also calling to each other.
While they're out gathering food, doing things like that.
Same. Okay. And of course we have the ability, because of our brains, is that we have slowly, through mother ease, as she calls it, or baby talk and so forth, gradually develop language and syntax, so that chimpanzees don't write poetry, but we do, because the brain is different.
I've never actually spent time in the company of any other primates, and so I can't speak with authority. Certainly our language skill looks to be, well, it's certainly quite strongly different, but we do know that the other primates, well, in fact,
they communicate.
Even many other vertebrates can form family bonds, and we've got a nice little slide. I think it'll be the next one that illustrates how wild, I think they're called macaws, which might be a bird.
In Japan, yes.
In Japan, naturally go to hot springs, and oh man, doesn't that look like the sort of thing that the humans love to do? And they do it obviously for comfort, but there we see a youngster between all the adults, cared for and secure.
As a matter of fact, I'm glad you used the word bond, because that's another thing that people who study infancy say that's how you can help your child from becoming a sociopath, is you bond them with other people. The lullaby is not just some trivial that is a profound thing for a child. The music, the rhythm, dependability of you depend upon the mother and the father, and then that music itself apparently has some kind of genetic predisposition. So that, in fact, there is a film of two twins who are just now beginning to walk, and they're trying to talk with each other in baby talk. And they're really, you can see these are kids who are driven to communicate, but they don't have the syntax and the language and the vocabulary yet.
It's amazing how fast we learn remarkably difficult things when we're young.
But incredible what we have to learn.
But of course, we're, to some extent, maybe that kind of learning is in a way instinctive. It's almost a kind of a circular usage of the term to say learning is that behavior we get that's non-instinctive, but fast learning is something that happens almost instinctively.
It's instinctive.
We're coming up on the halfway point. We really should remind viewers that this is a call-in show. Please give us a call at the number on your screen and talk to us about today's subject, which is indoctrination. Perhaps you could share a story of your own, whether positive or negative, about childhood indoctrination. All right, well, since we've hit the halfway point, we have a few announcements at the mid-program break. And we want to remind people that this is Freethought Forum, a program sponsored by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. And we also get support from some of the individual members, and we would like to say a special thank you to ST for his support, which has made one of these programs possible. You can send feedback to us at the email address, which will be on your screen, I guess, at some point here. It's freethoughtforum@yahoo.com. The Atheist Society of Knoxville meets several times a week. They usually meet in the evening for food, fun, and drink, and you can visit the ASK website for times and locations. The Rationalists of East Tennessee have Sunday activities. There's discussions or presentations on timeless topics like what every atheist should know about the Bible. What is art? About once a month we get together for a book club where we've done books such as The God Delusion, The American Age of Unreason, and this really great book here on your inner fish. That was one I really liked. In addition, the Rationalists of East Tennessee coordinates or is sort of the parent organization to Camp Quest of the Smokies. This is a fun science summer school adventure. You can visit the website on your screen, which I'm afraid we're blocking, or go to the Rationalist website where you can find a link to Camp Quest.
For children.
This is for children.
In the Smoky Mountain National Park. That's just amazing.
That's great. I believe it's a 6-day activity, and they have some nature programs. They go hiking. I know they
hiking up the mountains to the waterfall. I've been there. It is a marvelous place.
They've ridden horses in past years. There's some craft projects as well as something you won't find in your average vacation Bible school. There'll be lessons on critical thinking.
I remember they had just one is the importance of learning what to trust and who to trust, and who to trust and who not to trust. Every parent knows that you have to teach your child that there's some people not to trust, and some things not to trust, and then some things and people to trust. And that's part of what they do at this program.
It can be a problem to be too trusting. Yes. All right.
Well, there are dangers out there that the kids have to be protected from.
Okie doke. And this will be going on. It's later in the summer. I'm afraid I don't have the exact date in front of me, but they're taking reservations for Camp Quest now. We would encourage that if you have children and you'd like them to have a fun summer school activity but not send them to Vacation Bible School, to investigate Camp Quest of the Smokies. All right. Well, transitioning out of the RAT programs and back into indoctrination, we want to mention something that's sort of the opposite of the Camp Quest of the Smokies, and that was something we'd heard about called Jesus Camp. This is an activity where they say that they're like training warriors for Jesus. This is it's like a frightening development. It's rather like the sort of Christian versions of mahadrasas, where they're teaching people that the Bible is the only real information, and I don't know this about this particular camp, but there are some fundamentalist Christians, just as there are fundamentalist other groups, who think they believe there's a circle, and they are the closed circle, and that's where all important information lies, and then their children then should have only this material and not learn from others. And are we being told we've got a call?
We've got a call. Let's see what we have. Okay, you're on.
Please give us your name and give us a quick question or a comment.
You can call me by J.L.
You said J. Hill?
Okay, just call me J.L. or J. That'd be fine.
Okay,
all right, Jay.
I have a question. But I have a question about the atheists and the Christians. The atheists don't believe in God, and the Christians and those that do believe in God. Let's say, for instance, that God doesn't exist. Then the atheist doesn't lose nothing, and the Christians don't lose nothing. But let's say that God does exist, and I do believe He exists, because you cannot deny what you see with your eye. And if He does exist, then that means the atheist has been deceived for years.
Okay, Jay.
Wait a minute. Go ahead, Jay.
Were you done?
No. Spell this out some more, Jay, because this is old. Pascal's wager, if you remember. So spell it out in some detail, really, the consequences and all that, so we can be fair to what you're saying, okay?
Yes.
So I'm going to go ahead and let you go so I can turn TV here.
Well, Jay, don't go, Jay. What Joe was trying to say, I think he was expecting you to ask a little more, and that was the traditional way to phrase the question is if you don't believe in God and there is no God, you've nothing to lose. If you do believe in God and there is a God, you gain eternity. But if there is a God and you don't believe, you suffer the consequences of hell.
Right. See,
So-
I believe
Go ahead.
when the atheists began,
I'm sorry, say
these
again?
people did not want to answer to no one but themselves. But we all know that is not true. Everyone has to answer to someone at one given moment.
Okay.
So I understand you to say, in a sense, that you think that we're rebelling. We believe there's a God, but
no, I'm not saying you're rebelling.
Oh, no, let him say.
You got a free choice.
Go ahead.
You have a free choice to
Okay.
what you believe.
Okay.
And
Well-
the Christians and those that have a free choice of what they believe.
Mm-hmm.
But the question of it is, there has to be a place of a lighting situation that people can understand the whole picture,
Uh-huh.
so that they can make the right choice.
Sure. Okay.
Well, but Jay, I think you said something that contradicted itself. You said that we have a choice.
Yes.
Do you think you have a choice to believe that the god Zeus is real?
Yes, I guess if I choose to leave the Lord at any given moment, He will allow that, because He did not create us to be His puppets or robots. He created us to be able to worship Him in our free will.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a good God is.
But Jay,
He wants us to worship Him with our heart, not because we have to, because we love Him.
Let me deal with you.
okay.
Okay, Jay.
And it's free.
Okay, Jay, what if you think of this? You have maybe 2 horses in the race, okay? And you choose one or the other. Well, what if you have 10 horses in the race?
So I'm going to go ahead and let you go, but I can't hear what you're saying too good.
Oh, okay.
Way down.
Well,
No, I want to thank you.
But Jay, what we're trying to do is address the issue of how do you know that you're even worshiping the correct God? Now, we don't think there's any God that exists, but what if it's Zeus?
How do I know that
What if it's Zeus?
How do I know that I worship the real God?
Yeah, what if the real God is Zeus? Don't you run the same risk?
When you feel something supernatural, that you know that you cannot, you when you feel it, I mean, I'm telling you, when you walk into the presence of the Almighty God, you feel so much joy, so much abundance of life. Now, I walked on both sides of the fence. I know what I'm talking about. I walked on the other side of the fence when I felt nothing but negativity, doubt, dread. That's the enemy's side. The enemy came to steal, kill, and destroy. And anytime you feel negative, that's destroying you. But when you come into a presence of joy and abundance of life, and it's positive, then you know it's good.
Okay.
But Jay, I feel that, and I don't believe that Jehovah or Zeus is real. I don't need Jehovah or Zeus to feel delight in a spring day.
Since you took that,
No, go ahead.
if you blaspheme, this is the deadliest part of all. If you blaspheme the Holy Ghost, you have no hope of tomorrow.
But
That's the fine line.
Joe,
The very enemy that causes our flesh
Jay,
to be the way it is wants us to deny God because He wants to rule over us. But the problem is, even He's got to face God. Even He trembles at God's name.
But Jay, how do we know that it's not Zeus rather than
If you just
Jehovah?
want to believe that way, that's your free choice.
Okay.
But don't try to put words in my mouth. Don't try to put things in my mouth.
Well, what we're
That's
trying
gonna
to
cause me
do,
to find myself
Okay.
in a
We're
we're
situation
trying to
do it.
help you reason.
Because I've been covered by the blood of Jesus, and I have to get the discernment to know exactly who's talking I'm to and who I'm not.
Okay.
And I'm talking to the enemy right now.
Okay, now
That
that's-
is inside of you.
Okay, let me
That's got
talk
you
to you.
snowblind. It's got you deceived. But one day,
We have to
when
wait
you
a minute.
pass on and you go to the next life, you will see the enemy for who he is, and you're going to say, "This is who I was for."
Okay.
All right. Well, let Joe wrap up.
Eternity,
and let's say thanks.
With this type of attitude, I feel sorry for you. I really do.
Okay.
It don't stop me from loving you all.
Well, sure.
But it causes me to weep within myself, knowing that you just don't want to acknowledge the truth.
Are you aware? Are you familiar?
That's a tragedy.
Are you familiar with the?
So I'm going to let you go.
Are you familiar with the Church of Christ?
Push the off button, Joe.
Yeah. Okay. See, one of the problems. I mean, I can appreciate what the gentleman is trying to say. This experience, it's very important to say, this experience is meaningful to him.
Yes.
The feelings he's talking about are meaningful to him. Now, I personally cannot base my view of life and my commitments to his feelings. That's too subjective. My faith is not in him for my religion or my philosophy or my morality. My respect for him and what it means to him is, of course, part of my own philosophical outlook. But he must realize if he's not a member of the Church of Christ, let's say he's a Methodist or a Baptist, some members of the Church of Christ believe he has made the wrong choice, you see, which is what you were trying to say with the Zeus example.
Yes.
And there are some Muslims, not all, who think he is going to hell. Now, some Muslims would say, no, that's foolish, because there is diversity among Muslims, and there is diversity among Christians. Now, if I understand this gentleman's point of view, and he can correct me on this, but I think his view is that all the Jews who died in Auschwitz and that were murdered and put into concentration camps by the Nazis
and died outside the faith,
died and were not Christians. On this gentleman's view, all those Jews will be resurrected and sent to an eternal concentration camp. And what I'm saying to this gentleman, that's not my religion. That's brutal and it's savage, and I would like to be converted away from that. My feeling is I am liberated from that. I don't want to be into that kind of violent religion, which, according to this religion, this so-called God exterminated, once upon a time, almost the whole human race.
All but 7.
Now that is jihad of the worst kind. That kind of God, well, I remember a Methodist minister said, it's not so much whether you believe in God, it's which God you believe in. Mm-hmm. Now, and from this Methodist point of view, this gentleman is an atheist of type C. Are you with me?
Yes.
That his view of God is so evil that you wouldn't qualify it as God, you see. Now, he would, because his experiences are meaningful to him, but they would not be meaningful to me. Now, I would like to see if the gentleman would like to respond to us if we have time.
Well, he's not there anymore. Did we get another call? Okay. We'd heard the phone ring. We do want to remind the viewers that there's about 15 minutes left. We could take a few more calls. Give us a call at the number on the bottom of your screen.
Let me recommend another book, since we're dealing with indoctrination.
Sure enough.
This is a book that's been very popular, whether you're an atheist or a theist. This book is very meaningful if you're a parent. It's called Emotional Intelligence.
Emotional Intelligence.
And it tries to argue that the best way to get your children to grow up is early to make them feel secure and wanted and loved, and then gradually give them indoctrination of this view and that view, multiple indoctrination, so that they can decide for themselves. Do we have a caller coming in?
I think they're still screening the caller. Have we been notified?
Oh, good. Please, go ahead, and we're open. Speak up.
All right. Hi there, my name is James.
Hello, James.
And I was just wondering, other than the fact of believing in God or Christ, do you or your friend, can you see any faults or anything like that in the teachings of Christ, other than, faith in the afterlife and like just the basic earthly teachings?
Okay.
Well, pick a few, and I have a few I can talk about.
Almost all of them that I know of make, I'd say a good 80% of them make a lot of good sense.
Right.
Some of them are belligerent. Of course, as you well, maybe you don't, but biblical scholars know there's a lot of debate as to who the historical Jesus really is.
Right.
But let's just take what's in the New Testament, okay?
Okay.
The golden rule is absolutely essential for any kind of civilized living. And I would go so far as to say, now I think Richard Dawkins would not, but I would say the statement, love your enemies, is a good thing if you try to understand what it's saying. It means at least try to make friends of your enemies.
Right.
Now that to me is civilized, and any culture, I think, could profit from that.
Right.
May I ask James a question? So
Sure.
Joe mentioned the golden rule.
James had another. Go ahead, James.
No, that's fine. Go on ahead.
So James, you mentioned the golden rule. So I would assert that that's simply intelligent human behavior. It doesn't take a deity to come up with that. And in fact, about 500 years before the Christian Bible was written, Confucius came up with a very similar saying. Obviously, it wasn't in English, but it was something to the effect that do not do unto others what you would not have done unto yourself. Now, if the golden rule were to take divine inspiration, then does that mean that Confucius was divinely inspired?
Well, I mean, being a believer, I believe that the Spirit, well, I won't even say that. I'd say that consciousness is within all human beings. And,
Yeah, good. Go ahead. Go ahead.
It just seems like where are, even from a young child, we'll know whether we're doing right or wrong, almost in a way. A young child, say, if you ask them, did you spill the cup? For some reason, they'll say no, or they'll lie. But then they know they're doing wrong for some reason, and it just seems like that there's something in our consciousness that comes through, something beyond our imagination, because it just seems like what makes us thinking creatures is I can't fathom any other reason that we can actually be conscious beings without there being an immortal soul.
But when you say an immortal soul, what evidence do you have that the child who spills the drink and lies about it is going to have something that lasts forever? I think that about 3 to 10 minutes after my heart stops beating, my brain chemistry will be irrevocably lost, and I'll never have consciousness again. I don't think there's anything immortal about me. That's why my life during its duration is very precious to me. And
okay. What we're doing here is he says, here's his view and here's your view. And
okay.
You go back. I want to analyze. So your name is James, you say?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I think, if I'm understanding what you're saying, is that we have almost an innate ability to determine right from wrong.
Correct.
Okay, now, there is a passage in the Bible that says, bring up a child in the way he should go, so that when he is old, he will not depart from it.
True.
Now, that presupposes they're not born with knowing right from wrong. Also, there's a passage in the Gospel of Luke that says, and Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature. But
correct.
He didn't know it all. And you have children? And if
no, sir.
Okay, if you observe, talk to mothers. The problem is a lot of these books have been written by men.
Right.
The golden rule, in my opinion, began with mothers. And let me explain and see what you think. And it might partly fit with some of your view, but see what you think.
Okay.
A mother says to one of her children, don't push Johnny down. How would you like someone to push you down?
Right.
You hear mothers say this.
Christ teaching, do unto others as you wish to be.
You got it. You're right on target. You see, it's mothers who taught the golden rule. It didn't come in from Moses. It didn't come from Jesus. And I think, as you were trying to say earlier, we have the kind of I would say the brain development that makes it possible for us to develop that maybe some other species cannot develop it. And so we are different. Now, whether you want to call it a soul or something else, that's another question that we could honestly debate.
Right.
But at that point, it seems that we do recognize that there is something quite special about us. Now, wild dogs, from what I've observed in some films, will go back and help one dog if it's crippled.
Right.
Now, the reason is wild dogs, if you've noticed, they're small, and they cannot take down their prey.
Right, that's why they travel in packs.
Exactly. And so it's by traveling in packs that they learn somehow cooperation, and that may be the beginning of ethics, although the Apostle Paul has a cue on this in 1 Corinthians, that the heart and the other parts of the body need each other. You remember?
Right.
And so you've got cooperation going on there, and that we may have built into our genetic system ethics already, called cooperation. And before Moses got "thou shalt not bear false witness," the Egyptians already had a rule against it. And
humans. I'm fond of cats. I know people who are fond of dogs. And we develop trusting relationships with one another when we treat them by the golden rule.
Right.
Yeah. And dogs can learn to make friends with former enemies.
Right.
My granddaughter went next door, and my neighbors said, "This is a huge dog, I wouldn't approach." My neighbor said to me, "Your granddaughter, who's now 8, decided that my dog was going to be her friend, never mind the dog." And they became friends.
All right. Well, so James, we've got about 5 minutes left. Do you have another quick question or observation? Otherwise, we'd like to clear the line in case we could get one more caller.
All right, I'd like to just say one more thing. In this world, I know there's so much just to even think about, but at the end of the day, if you are an atheist, you live your life, you die, and that's it, And you can't. There's no one to turn around to say, "Yeah, I told you so," because it's all over. But if you're a gambling man, why not at least give a shot at the faith? Because if it is true, there might be some repercussions. So, just in that sense, maybe take a shot, but to each his own. And I understand you all's views, and I respect that.
Okay.
I respect what you all are doing.
That's fair enough.
Well, let's thank James. Let's clear the line. Push the off button,
Okay.
Joe. James, I'll give you a little bit of an answer on that.
Thank you, James.
And we understand your point, but we want to turn it around and say a couple of things. Well, if I don't really believe God exists, I can't just pretend it. I don't believe God exists because of evidence. And if I was somehow faking it, wouldn't God know? The other thing is that the belief in God doesn't come without a cost. Let's say that you're devoting half of your Sundays to church and a tenth of your income. That has a real cost. And what if at the end of the day it turns out that it wasn't Jehovah, but in fact it was Zeus? So I have to encourage you to investigate all of the gods and give all of them a fair chance. I'm particularly fond of Egyptian mythology, and I would recommend the Egyptian goddess Ma'at. I don't believe she's real, but she has unassailable morals. All right?
And I think that's what James was talking about when he was trying to talk about Jesus. The morals of Jesus, and
yes,
and I don't think we'd have any complaint about that. Now there was one part of Jesus,
and that's why we brought up though that Confucius had said the same thing. It doesn't take divine insight.
The Hillel, a Hebrew before Jesus, slightly before, also had the golden rule. And I think we recognize the golden rule is part of the necessary equipment to have a society that's worth living in. Without the golden rule, life would be nasty, brutish, and probably very short.
That's right. We've got a couple minutes left, and I've got some feedback from members of RET and ASK when I asked them about their childhood indoctrination experiences, and I can't read all of these, so I'll do a little bit of summarizing. DM gave us some feedback about experiencing the tale about Joseph and the many-colored coat, and says, even though Joseph, of course, was Old Testament, Jesus was probably not even a gleam in God's eye yet. I found Joseph to be the kind of fellow who provoked jealousy in his brothers. He seemed to have no problem with being his father's favorite. Why didn't everyone get a coat of many colors? So you can, see that, she was feeling, some socialist tendencies of, why isn't life a little more fair? Okay. We got a feedback from an AU who explained that, in his opinion, church was just brainwashing, and individuals were believing a bunch of fairy tales, and people were raising their children, to believe in fairy tales. There was only a small difference between Jesus and Santa Claus. We, as atheists, we sometimes say Jesus is just Santa Claus for grown-ups. All right, well, it sounds like there's a caller calling in right now, and I don't know that we're going to have time to take them quick.
We don't.
Yeah, so,
unfortunately,
caller, we urge you to call again next week. We're on.
I want to thank both of and I'm sure you too, both our callers. I'm very appreciative of their saying it. I'd like to point out that there is ground for bridge building in this. I'm not interested in trying to find out how many people I disagree with, because I think we need each other to have a society. We are not all going to convert to one religion. We're not all going to be atheists, but we do have to live together and find common ground to do that.
And that's why we call this program Freethought Forum. We talk about our beliefs, and we ask people to call in, people who will agree with us and people who will disagree with us. Well, we've got about 30 seconds left, and we want to do some wrap-up business.
Good.
This program is sponsored by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. You can send us email at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com, and you can also call this station and get back issues of this show. They can burn several to a disc, and they'll charge you about $20. So on behalf of me, Faithless Forrest, and
Joe Barnhart,
we want to say thank you to Jonas and to Sam for being our technical assistants, and to all of the callers that we had today on Freethought Forum. As Garrison Keeler says, be well, do good, and keep in